Hello and welcome to the Academy to Functions Facilitator Certification Workshop Part 2. In this part, we're going to discuss the introduction to functional fitness and how to correct dysfunction. Specifically, we're going to define the term of functional fitness, and we're also going to introduce the components of functional fitness. For correcting dysfunction, we'll again define the term, we'll look at the aspect of functional screenings, and then how we utilize functional fitness prescriptions to meet their specific category of dysfunction. Introduction to functional fitness. What is functional fitness and how does it work for you? Functional fitness is a systematic approach to reestablishing natural posture and natural functional human movement. And how does this work? Functional training allows you to follow a specific progression that emphasizes the key components of function, which include mobility, stability, strength, and dynamic movement. But what is mobility? What determines that mobility, and how can we restore it? Mobility is the amount of available motion at any given joint. The shape of that joint and the bones, the rigidity of the ligaments and joint capsules, as well as the elasticity or the pliability of the muscles, tendons, and fascia, which is the connective tissue underneath the skin and between the muscles, that allows or determines how much mobility any person will have at any given joint. The way we restore this is first by using myofascial release techniques, or those trigger points or knots in the elastic tissue. So those sore spots, those knots, those areas of dysfunctional tissue that are tight and sore, we have to work those out first. And then we're going to stretch that overactive tissue or that shortened elastic tissue, or that tissue that's become inelastic or tight. Effectively, reestablishing mobility is the absolute first and most important component. If we do not establish mobility first, it's all for naught. So remember, when it comes to restoring function, mobility is key. Stability. What is it? What determines it? And again, how can stability be restored? Stability is the ability to maintain postural and joint control during movement. This goes beyond just simple balance as we may think stability actually defines. To determine this, your proprioceptors of your bodies must be efficient. So effectively, a proprioceptor is a little communication cell in your body that tells your brain and central nervous system, so your brain and your spinal column, what it is doing and what is it perceiving from the external environment. It sends that information to your brain and you react appropriately. It's a sequence and types of muscles that are recruited, and it also includes the eccentric and isometric strength of core musculature. Eccentric means the deceleration, so as you slow down, how well do you slow down forces on your body? Isometric is how well you can hold or maintain a single stationary position, and specifically how your core musculature can do that to maintain the relationship of your spine to your hips. The way we restore stability is really through two primary mechanisms. The first is a core strengthening progression. Again, we start from isometric and eccentric exercises and moving on up to concentric, or these are the shortening or the traditional types of flexion extension exercises that we think with fitness programming. But we first start with the essentials, and that's our ability to stabilize through isometric contraction and to slow or decelerate through eccentric activities. The second thing we do is balance training progressions. And this is using a change in the base of support, so how wide something is, or how wide your base of support is, how many contact points, etc. that you have, and then we incorporate different exercises into these. So this is a lot of extremity training. So when it comes to your shoulders, knees, ankles, etc., think of balance training as training the extremities. Strength. What is it? What determines it? And how can it be restored? Strength is the amount of force the muscles can produce or resist without failure. Effectively, think of it like the weight that works against the body that you must overcome. What determines it? It's the number, the size, and the type of muscle fibers recruited. So each person, again, is made up just a little bit differently, and each muscle that we use, it has a little bit different configuration. So depending upon that type of muscle and the individual and what muscles comprise their body will ultimately determine strength. The other part that's very important is neuromuscular efficiency. Again, this is the ability of your nervous system to communicate with the muscle system in an effective manner. So we want a streamlined, very direct, and very specific route to each specific muscle so that it knows exactly how it should operate. And this is a function of neuromuscular efficiency. Another very important concept is length-tension ratio. So effectively, as we look at different parts of our body or different musculature, they should have a specific length. Within each muscle are what are called sarcomeres. And sarcomeres have, effectively think of it as two lines that overlap one another. As those two lines overlap one another, there's an optimal amount of coverage that they should have. So if we look at two lines, and if they overlapped each other in half, so effectively leaving half of each line exposed and the other half overlapping one another, this would be considered an effective length-tension ratio. But when mobility is thrown off, so we have either an over-lengthened or an over-shortened muscle, those lines would either have less overlap, meaning you may have 2/3 to 3/4 of each line exposed with only 1/3 or 1/4 of them overlapping, or if they're over-shortened, you may have as much as 2/3 or 3/4 of them overlapping, leaving only 1/3 to 1/4 exposed. And what that does is that decreases the body's ability to optimize strength or force production. So how do we restore this? First off is reestablishing the length-tension ratio. And again, that a lot of times starts with the concept of mobility. The other part is reestablishing stability. If we have the ability to stabilize our spine and hips or our core, we have more energy to be able to be put into other strength activities. And then over time, we need to increase our loads or increase that force or weights, as well as increasing the resistance. So we're increasing difficulty over time. And last but not least is dynamic movement. What is it? What determines it? And how can we restore? Dynamic movement is motion that is executed simultaneously through multiple planes. We'll talk about the concept of multiple planes a little bit later in this particular part of the video. What determines it? First off, the available mobility. Remember, our number one most important key is mobility first. Our ability to stabilize. We have to be able to stabilize the core through isometric and eccentric strength, and then the joints through balance, so our extremities. We must maintain sufficient strength to overcome the forces against us, and we must be able to coordinate and fire those muscles at the right time and with the right muscles doing the right work. And to restore this, we progressively increase our range of motion, we progressively decrease our base of support, we go from low load to high load resistance, and then we integrate upper and lower body exercises in all planes. Which leads us to correcting dysfunction with the ATF system. What is dysfunction? What causes dysfunction? And how do you determine dysfunction? Dysfunction is an unnatural posture or movement, so the exact polar opposite of function. And what is it? Again, think back to the key components of functional fitness. It's that loss of mobility, the loss of stability, the loss of strength, and that loss of dynamic movement that's associated with a plethora of injuries and conditions and repetitive or poor movement patterns. And what determines this? We can use a variety of functional screening tools or sensations or discomfort or pain to determine dysfunctional movement. So how do we categorize dysfunction? What are these categories and what's the purpose of dysfunctional categories? The ATF system uses 6 very specific categories of dysfunction to classify improper posture and movement. And again, going back to our core principles of individualization, this is how we determine a person's individual specific needs, is through their category of dysfunction. What is the purpose of this dysfunctional category? Again, each category then identifies the primary muscular culprits for dysfunction, and this includes limitations in mobility, stability, strength, and dynamic movement. It also provides a framework to prescribe functional fitness prescriptions, which will be described later in other parts of this facilitator training. How are functional screenings conducted? There's really 2 to 3 different versions of functional screenings. First is face-to-face or electronically done by the ATF staff. This incorporates a fee. Face-to-face is often done with our group workout sessions or our corporate fitness wellness packages. And for a structured fee, the ATF staff can come to your facility or to your organization and conduct face-to-face dysfunctional or functional screenings. This also can be done electronically through the use of photographs that can be emailed to the staff, at which time the client can be classified according to their dysfunctional category, and that can be done for a small fee. This also can be done completely free. There is an online functional screening tool where clients can functionally screen themselves 100% free. They can then categorize themselves according to their category of dysfunction and select the appropriate functional fitness prescription. So again, how do they do this? Once someone is screened and categorized, they will follow the specific FFP or functional fitness prescription for that specific dysfunction. Functional fitness prescriptions, or FFPs. How are the website FFPs designed? Again, they're specific to the individual dysfunction. They use an annual plan of systematic variation or periodization. Each annual plan advances for each consecutive year of participation so that there's, as opposed to repeating one over and over and over. Again, this allows for progression and variety and a decrease in staleness and burnout. How are worksite or group FFPs different? FFPs are still individualized for each person and is determined by which category of the 6 categories of dysfunction the individual falls into. The annual plan is tailored to the specific demands and needs of an organization. So as we look at it as at a client's or organization's personal needs throughout the year, we program variations specific to their calendar and needs, whether it be for an event or it be specific workplace practices. So, in review, we discussed the introduction to functional fitness. We defined the term and the 4 key components of mobility, stability, strength, and dynamic movement. As it comes to correcting dysfunction, we again defined the term, and that is the absence of mobility, stability, strength, and dynamic movement. The use of functional screenings and how that allows us to categorize into one of 6 or more categories of dysfunction, and then how we use the functional fitness prescriptions then to specifically program variation to that individual and organization's specific needs. That concludes Part 2 of the ATF Facilitator Certification Workshop.